heard in the soundbite to open the show, Gary Kubiak announced today as the offensive coordinator. He was already an offensive assistant/assistant head coach working with Kevin Stefanski last year, sort of constructing this offense. You like it, Boone? You like this move?
I love everything about it. I love that it wasn't his son either. I'm a big Coops fan, and I think that he's a risk taker at times. I think he's extremely confident in his play calling. I've talked to guys that have played in his system, and the things that they say about him are tremendous. Like, I've never heard a friend of mine be like, I didn't like the guy. Like, everyone's like, dude, love Coops. Like, dude's just gonna drill you if you're a team. And I think that that's what this team needs. And also, I think it's what Mike Zimmer needs in order for him to kind of let go of the reins on the offense. You know, I think this is one of the sides that he trusts and truly believes in. And it's not going to be one of these guys that he's hounding over because, dude, it's Gary Kubiak. You're not really going to be standing over him like, what are you doing? He's going to be like, bro, go away.
You really think Zim steps aside and just lets Kubiak do his thing? Because Zimmer, I mean, I'm sure he doesn't get involved in the specifics of game planning and game and play calling. And we sort of act like Mike Zimmer has nothing to do with offense and wants nothing to do with offense. But on the flip side, Boone, one of the narratives around Mike Zimmer is him kind of sticking his nose in that offensive room, mainly to say we're not running the football enough and we need to run the football more. You think with Gary Kubiak, he just steps aside and lets him run this thing?
Absolutely. I mean, dude, logically thinking, I get that like Mike Zimmer's a head coach and very widely respected. But so is Gary Kubiak. And you got to remember, dude, there's a lot of egos in that room, and you don't want to be causing tension against a guy who, number one, has already coached in Super Bowls and done that and been there and been doing that at a high level for a long time and has had some successful offenses. I mean, I think that if you're Mike Zimmer, you basically just say, hey, Gary, get us out of here, man. We're in a place right now that we can go either way. We can either falter now and just keep stumbling downhill, or we can choose to get better and succeed. And I think that Gary's one of those guys that brings it because, like I said, his confidence level is huge. He's obviously done this before. There's no game that's too big for him. And I think that he truly does know what Mike wants. We've been in there with Mike for this last year. I think how much control did he have over Kevin? Probably not a lot. I don't see him being the guy that's like, hey, Kev, let's run 43 on this one. I see him being the guy like, hey, pre-snap meetings and all these meetings during the week. I see Gary being very influential to Kevin, but I saw Kevin probably calling all the plays. I'm curious to see what Gary's going to change it up a little bit in. Is he going to, feed it to Dalvin more? Is he going to try and drop a little more play action? Is he going to get certain guys involved more? I mean, there's so much talent on this team that for a guy like Gary Kubiak not to use it to the best of his ability, that would just be such a disservice to the Vikings. So I think that he knows that. And when you talk about these old coaches, man, there's something about them. Like, they're just risky. They don't care. They're like, listen, man, no risk it, no biscuit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've lived this too long. I've lost this game because I didn't risk it. They learn from their past losses. You hear so many of them say, well, we did this last time, so we're not going to do that again. These are the guys that are like, you know what, man? If you want the trophy, if you really want to be on the top of that mountain, you got to risk it at times. And with this offense, it would be exciting to watch them risk it more.
Were you surprised by this news? Because no. I was reading today a piece, I think it was at The Athletic. I was reading a lot of stuff about Gary Kubiak today to get ready for this show about sort of his journey now back into coaching. Because for those who don't know, I mean, you probably know he was a Super Bowl winning head coach for the Denver Broncos, but then had a couple of health scares, one of which he was taken out of the stadium on a stretcher,
Houston,
right in front of his son, who had just recently joined his staff. And he sort of walked away from the game of football, Alex, because of what it was doing to his health. I mean, it's a highly demanding job being an NFL head coach, and the hours that go into it, the stress that goes into it. And these guys are all just insane about what they do, and it will wear down the human body. And he sort of walked away and then came back in like a consultant role for the Denver Broncos, but was still arm's length from the game itself and from coaching. And as you just talked about, still sort of arm's length from the actual game day action this season. He was up in the box, but it was Kevin Stefanski sort of running the show. Now this is a guy with two prior heart issues, one on which he was taken off on a stretcher, coming back into the game. I can't say I'm entirely surprised because of the mindset of an NFL head coach, and especially one who's accomplished as much as Gary Kubiak has, having been to the mountaintop of a Super Bowl championship. You always have that itch, but it really seemed like he had come to terms with not being as involved with the game as he now is going to have to be as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I remember the game that he collapsed. I remember watching it on video. I mean, it was sad. And then you think about, that's just the alpha being the alpha, man. We can't sit around and wait. We got to just keep going. I'm going to get back into coaching. I'm just going to do some little stuff, babe. Don't worry about it. Next thing you know, you're the OC of the Minnesota Vikings with the possibility of having the number one rushing tag, right? His wife's probably like, really, Gary? Really? Babe, listen, couple years, I'm out. You know me. It's exciting because he has done it, and he's done some great things with some great teams, and now you have a team that is so spectacular. And I think he really does have another itch to get that Super Bowl. Like I think, like you said, when you're out and you're out for a good reason and you come back in, it's because you really, really want another ring. And I don't blame him. They're addicting, man. Winning is addicting. And then you look at this offense that he gets to command now and how dangerous it could be. And I think it's great, number one, because he was here last year. And that's obviously going to help. And he knows Kirk. It's not something that's unfamiliar to him. It's not like you're walking in with a new OC, like, say you were to hire Jay Gruden and bring him in. It's not like you have to go through the formalities of, hey, I'm Jay, you're Kirk. What do you like? This is what I like. Gary already knows what he was doing. He already knows what Kirk wants to run. He already knows how Kirk wants to call it. He already knows the play calls. You don't have to change anything up. That is so huge for an offense. And we've talked before, and we had Sam Bradford on last time, talking about how Sam played under 7 different OCs. And when you talk about not being able to have any continuity with anything, like, God, could you imagine every year having to change the simple things like a snap count changes every year? That would annoy the hell out of me. And you talk about having to do that how many different times? Well, now you have a team that really is kind of up in the air. They're kind of in limbo because it's like, man, which way are we going to go right now? We could go up or we could go down. What we do next determines that. Hiring Gary Kubiak was a huge step up because it keeps the same guy in a pivotal role in the offense. It keeps the offense in continuity. It keeps this engine from having to stop. It's pretty much just keeps rolling, right? Like, hey, listen, this is what we did last year. This was our philosophy. Now this is the steps we wanted to take naturally. This is what we've done organically. Like, let's keep going this way. And you don't have to do the whole, hey, so you really like that play, huh? Yeah, I do too. So what don't you like? Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to call this? Nah, dude, it's already there. This is already the terminology. This is how we've been doing it. This is how we've been taking steps. Now we need to put some new pieces in place and go forward.
And I've said before, and I use Jay Cutler as a reference because I'm a Jay Cutler apologist, that there are 3 ways to ruin a quarterback. One is surround him with no talent. One is put no offensive line in front of him. And the last one is what you just talked about, and that's changing systems and offensive coordinators every year. And I use Jay Cutler as an example because the Bears literally did all 3 of those things to Jay Cutler. Sometimes all 3 at the same time over the course of his time there. But I think with Kubiak, the thing people are going to look at this, if anybody's looking at it skeptically, Boone, because you talk about the continuity and that he was already part of this last year. You want improvement. You want this thing to be better than it was last year. You're not looking for status quo with the offense, although it took a huge step forward from year 1 with Kirk Cousins under center to year 2. But you still want this thing to improve and get better. And I think people are wondering how does it necessarily get better with more of the same philosophies and more of the same thing that was already in there last year, especially if you're somebody who believes, and there are plenty of people out there who believe this, that Gary Kubiak already was the offensive coordinator last year and Kevin Stefanski was only that in title. I don't believe that. I think, and you just touched on it, Stefanski was running as much of the show as most offensive coordinators and calling his own plays. Kubiak had a role in constructing the playbook, like you said, game planning during the week, being in that quarterback's room or in the offensive room and giving whatever input that he had to provide. But how does this get better with the same philosophy, same offense, and maybe even the same guy running that offense ultimately?
Listen, I think it can get better for many reasons. Number one, the way that they ended the season, that game just is not going to sit well with people. The coming off the Saints game, you talk about having all this momentum, and then you go into the 49ers and you run the ball 9 times. Like, dude, Coops, at the right time, he's going to know when to hit the gas. Hey, listen, this is going to be a street fight. This is not my first rodeo. Technically, for Stefanski, it kind of was. Like, hey, man, it's the first time you've been in the playoffs and things aren't really going really well. What do you do? Well, Coops knows. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to stick to my run game because Dalvin's just going to wear everybody down. And then we're going to pick up the play action. I think when you look at things, you say, listen, from year to year, what needs to get better? Number one, the quarterback hits need to go way down. Number two, penalties need to go down, especially pre-snap. Like, we're getting into this offensive times where you should know this book inside and out, backwards and forwards. If you've been here for more than a year and you're making pre-snap penalties, that's a problem. Like, those need to get cleaned up. And then you talk about being able to run the ball more effectively. Like every year, you're always trying to find a way. How can we run this ball better? How can we get Dalvin in space more? How can we use him in the screen game better? All these things are going to come up. And I think the answers for Kubiak is going to be super easy because when you're looking at the film, there's so many highlights of Dalvin and things that he does well, and especially Kirk. And people are down on Kirk, but this year, Dalvin was his best friend. And you look at these two guys go forward and you say, listen, man, we got Diggs in this room. We got Thielen. We got Rudy. We got Irv Smith Jr. Like, we got some guys that we can have a lot of fun with. Now, how do we get these guys more involved, especially guys like Rudy? Like, I don't think he was used enough this year. He's such a big target. And Sam Bradford said, listen, just throw him the ball. He'll find a way to get it. At times, I got it. Like, Thielen was hurt and everybody kind of had to play a different role. But I think that's also where Kubiak's going to be able to come in, is being able to adapt this offense at times when he needs to. Hey, listen, we're down a big player. All right, listen, we've done this before. This is what we're going to do. These are the things that these experienced coaches bring with them, is the ideas and the ideals of an offense, of how I want it run and how it's going to be run effectively. That is what's so exciting. And I say that because it could have been Clint. And yeah, maybe Gary would have been in his ear a lot, but it wouldn't have been Gary. And I think that was a right move. Like, hey, listen, Clint, we know you're probably going to be a guy someday, but listen, we want your dad to take the reins. We need a big boy with big boy pads who knows how to get us out of troubling situations and not be the guy that turns into every other OC. Okay, well, let's just stand back there and throw it 100 times. Dog, that's stupid. Like, you got to find another way to win a game. I'm sorry. You just can't let people pin their ears and destroy us. And that also comes into the offseason of, like, we got to bolster this O-line a little bit more.
We were talking with Sage Rosenfels earlier. Well, we recorded it earlier. You're going to hear it this afternoon on Mackey and Judd with Ramie right around 4:30. I just let you in a little behind the curtain there for you Score North listeners. Sometimes those are pre-recorded. And he talked about the fact that, yes, this is the same system, but, Kyle Shanahan also runs the West Coast system. A lot of guys around the league are running the West Coast system, but they're not all the same. That's a larger umbrella that a lot of different offenses fall under. It's sort of a generic term for an offense. Can you explain in layman's terms, for those of us who didn't play in the NFL, Alex, what are some of the variations or twists on the same system? It doesn't have to necessarily be the West Coast system, because this applies to other systems too. There's a broad sort of general name. Like I said, a bunch of offenses fall under an umbrella. But what are some of the things that can be different or tweaked within the same system, if that made any sense?
Dude, you know what the one thing is really, like, I thought was the biggest thing was the verbiage. In most systems, like, so basically, like, in a West Coast system, everything is kind of numberized. And it's like everything has a number attached to it, whereas the other one is everything has a words to attach to it. There's different routes run. In some of these offenses, you have to be able to run the ball to play action off of it, and that's your whole offense. And some of them, it's like, hey, listen, we're just going to stand back here and let these dudes throw it around, I think the one thing that's so cool about these different offenses is when you see teams that employ different offenses during the season. And when I say that, I think about like the Patriots. At times they look like they're these spread out, 5 out, we're running digs and verticals and doing all this. And then other times they look like a power football team. They look like a pro style offense that's in the pro eye all the time, or an offset formation. And then other games he's only in gut. There's so many, like G-Row's offense to me always seems kind of like collegey, because it was like a pistol formation and it could be run out of a gun formation, but there wasn't a lot of things under center. They didn't like Colin to be under center a lot because, number one, when you walk guys up in the A gap, you could be in a lot of trouble. Like, because that's when the guards would start telling you what the play was. Because if you just walked up in the A gap and my quarterback's under center, well, all of a sudden I got to we start like recommunicating things. We start miscommunicating things. So they were always like, listen, let's keep Colin in the gun or in the pistol. That way, if anybody walks up, it'll always be the running backs. And then, like, at times that became hard because the running back had to run around Colin. So then the rules started changing. Like, there's so many different offenses when you talk about, like, these offenses under umbrella. There is, but they kind of separate themselves by formation, by route trees, by what the quarterback does. Like, you see all these read option now. There's only a couple teams that really run it effectively. Right. But it's awesome to watch. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, when they can't do that, what do? Well, then they go to pistol and they start doing other things out of it. And they start play actioning out of it. And it's like, man, this is intense. But Gary's is basically, dude, we're going to run the ball to set up the play action. And everything, and play action nowadays isn't just a waggle anymore. It's not just bootlegging your quarterback out. It's like, we're going to run a fake power that looks so much like power that safety's going to think it's power. And then all of a sudden we're going to have Diggs run a dig route behind. Like, that's what's so unique about these new play actions. Whereas, like, when I first came in, it was like waggle right, waggle left, They're like, "Yeah, this is so stupid." And then Giro started making it like, "Hey, listen, let's do it." We used to have a play called Crunch, and it was like 3 traps on one play. So every other player was trapping the next guy over, and then every other player off of that was climbing. It was like the most intense play you ever saw. It was super fun to draw up because it was like, man, there's a lot of people getting hit on this play. But then he was like, let's run a play action out of it because there's no way anybody think we would fake this and not run it, because you're basically leaving the 3 technique unblocked. And then it ended up working. And that's when G-Rail was like, well, maybe we could do other things off of this, like the trap or a wham or a zone fill backside off a play action. Like everything started becoming more advanced. And that's what I think Gary's going to be so great at, is taking all of that and saying, what's good for us? I know what he already likes. Let's add a little bit of this too, because I know Dalvin would like to do this, and this will really suck up the safeties. Like, that's what you get from these experienced coaches.
Football.
That's just good meat and potatoes, football-y football goodness right there from Alex Boone. I love it all. Here's the question that I have, though, Boone, and I asked Sage this, too. Again, you'll hear that interview coming up at 4:30. I know that a lot of what Gary Kubiak does with an offense, and we saw this last year with Kevin Stefanski's running the show, is running the ball to set up the pass and then using play action. And that play action is something that Kirk Cousins has shown himself to be good at, proficient at. Some of his best numbers come when they run things out of play action. But other than that one trait, is Cousins really a good fit for a Gary Kubiak system? And I ask that because another trait of Gary Kubiak systems is smaller, more athletic offensive lines, and that's good for run blocking. But if there's ever a weakness to an offensive line that's constructed that way, it's pass blocking. And I know you always want mobility and pocket awareness as traits in any quarterback that you're looking for. But when you have an offensive line that's smaller and more athletic, and like I said, probably not the greatest pass blocking offensive line in the league. I think they ranked 30th in PFF grades this year. I know how much you hate those, but I'm going to quote them anyways. Is that a good fit when you have a guy who doesn't seem to have great pocket awareness? As Collar puts it, Cousins will run himself into pressure sometimes if there's just a little bit of a collapse in the pocket. And you want mobility, obviously. Is he a bad fit for a Gary Kubiak system and a Gary Kubiak style offensive line?
No, and I understand what you're saying. I think that this is where you make up with a guy like that. Number one, with play action, you always end up getting your time because the defense has to regain themselves and get back to you. You know, like everyone always sees run at first, and then by the time they realize it's not run, you're making up time for your receivers to get open. You're moving yourself away from everybody, the trouble. I think the one thing when you're looking at this, and this has always been my pet peeve, especially with offenses, you have to have a quick answer for your quarterback, always. Like if the running back's not going to stand and block, dude, get out now and get yourself open. So many guys just run these stupid swing routes, and it's like the quarterback's afraid to throw it because he sees you being trailed, and he's like, man, you're going to get smacked if I throw you this ball. Is it even worth it? And that's when you start seeing them start to stutter a little bit. You got to change it up. Everything the running back does is so important, whether it's chipping and getting out or staying in to block or chipping and running a route off another route. There's so many new offenses in this NFL that you see these running backs running real route trees. Like, what was that? Was that just like a smoke route? Like, what did that dude just run? There's so many fullbacks right now running wheel routes. You're like, dude, what is going on right now? But then you look at these other offenses and they're just still kind of basic. And you're like, dude, if you guys had an easy answer for your quarterback, you would, number one, neutralize so much of this pass rush. And number two, you would be driving down the field so much more because people eventually forget about the checkdowns. And then all of a sudden you throw it to a guy like Dalvin. He's going to get you 5 regardless. He's going to drag people for 5 yards. Dude, you got to get him open earlier for your quarterback.
One more question for you as it pertains to Gary Kubiak. Not yesterday, but on Tuesday when I filled in for you, we kicked around the subject of whether or not they might regret not hiring Kevin Stefanski and saying parting ways with Mike Zimmer. Totally reckless, hypothetical. If you had the choice between Zim or Gary Kubiak as your head coach, which one do you want?
Zim.
Okay, why?
I think because he's been here, he knows the defense long enough. Like, if you're going to do a shakeup, dude, you got to do a shakeup.
Okay.
Like, you got to do a real shakeup. Like, even the Kevin Stefanski hire would not have been that big of a shakeup. Like, it'd have been like, okay, well, they hired from within. Like, if you're going to shake it up, you got to shake the whole tree because then all of a sudden it's like, who's he keeping as the DC? Who's staying? Who's going? It's just there's so many questions. And I think that if you're going to do it, like when I'll give the best example. I remember when Kyle Shanahan got hired in San Francisco. Dude, he fired everybody. Like training staff. I remember they was like, wow, dude, I've never seen a dude fire the training staff. Like, my man wants his own people in there. But he was right, man. I want a culture shake up. I want to change this culture around here. We need to shake things up. The equipment guys got fired. I remember the equipment guys called me like, dude, could you believe I got fired? I was like, damn, man, that dude is for real. But he's right. You need to change the culture around the building. You can't keep things
the equipment guy?
I mean,
why
dude,
does the equipment guy got to go? He's part of the culture.
Everybody got it, dude. I mean, but he wanted his guys, and it didn't seem to not work out for him. Like, it takes time for that to grab, and that's why you're seeing this offense now. They've had the same guys in it for how many years, starting to take off, and that's what's so exciting about the Cougs is like he's already been here, but he wasn't really calling the shots. Like, he was in the background paying attention. What is everybody like? What is this guy like? How does he do this? Does he do this well? Oh, I like that. Oh, if I become the guy, we're doing this. Like, he took notes, and everybody saw his face, and everybody talked to him, and everybody learned from him. Well, now he's just stepping into a big role going, hey, man, I've been here. And people are like, you're right, you have been here. This is great. Let's keep going. And that's what's so exciting.